Welcome everyone to the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series, and thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about how mentoring programs can provide ongoing post-match training opportunities for mentors. I'm Jennifer Burgoyne, Program Manager here at Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation. So let's get started. This webinar is part of the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series, which is funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention through the National Mentoring Resource Center and facilitated in partnership with Mentor. These webinars would not be possible without the planning team, which includes the incredible affiliates shown on this slide. In addition to this webinar series, the National Mentoring Resource Center provides many resources for mentoring practitioners. And at the end of today's webinar, we'll provide more details about how you can access this free support. Before we get started, I wanted to share some housekeeping information. In 1 week, you'll receive an email with information about how to download a copy of these slides and view the webinar recording. You can also access this information directly by going to Mentor's Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series website in the next week. And if you Google Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series, it should pop right up for you. And to continually improve this series, we're looking for your input. A short survey will pop up as you exit the webinar. We ask that you take just about 3 minutes to give us your feedback. I review that feedback every month, and our team meets to review it, and we really utilize it to improve this series. So we appreciate your time there. We want this to be a participatory experience, so we recommend using the question box to ask questions throughout the webinar. My colleague Melissa English, who works here at Mentor with me, will be queuing up questions to share with panelists during the Q&A portion of the webinar. We may not get to all questions because there are several hundred of you on this webinar today, which is awesome, but we will definitely do our best. So first, to get a sense of who's with us today, we have 2 short polls for you. So I'm going to launch the first one here. And the first one is, what is your experience level in the mentoring field? Let me bring that up. Are you a beginner, experienced, or expert? I'll give you a moment. Alrighty, so it looks like we have about 66% who are experienced, 23% beginner, and 10% expert. So it looks like we've got a diverse crowd here. And I have one more poll for you, and that is, what is your role in the mentoring field? Are you a practitioner, researcher, technical assistance provider, funder, or other? Alrighty, so we've got 65% practitioner, I guess that makes sense, 12% TA provider, 21% other. If you'd like, you can feel free to write down what that other means to you. We always like to see that. 3% funder and 0% researcher today. So a lot of practitioners, which is great. We think and hope that today's webinar will really apply to everyone on the line. Alrighty, so today we're joined by 3 expert panelists who have years of experience in the fields of positive youth development and mentoring. So I'd first like to introduce Judy Strother Taylor. Judy is a specialist in the fields of youth development, alcohol, drug abuse, and delinquency prevention, juvenile justice, mentoring, and alternative health care. With more than 40 years of experience, her career has ranged from providing direct service at the community level to policy development as a clinical analyst with the White House Special Action Office for Drug Abuse Prevention. She has directed initiatives for federal agencies, including the Department of Education, OJJDP, the Bureau of Prisons, and the Agency for International Development. Currently VP of Mentor Management Systems, she has helped mentoring programs across the country through the National Mentoring Resource Center, Youth Build, Mentor, and CARS. Judy is also a mentor. Hi, Judy. Welcome today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And then next, I'd like to introduce Wesley West. Wesley comes to us as a coordinator of group mentoring programs at 6 high schools in San Francisco Unified School District. Called Project Arrive, this program is a part of the school district's larger mentoring program, Mentoring for Success, which focuses on students with the highest needs, including those that have challenges with grades and school attendance. As the coordinator for Project Arrive, Wesley coordinates the program, trains mentors, and he also serves as a group mentor. Growing up on a farm in southern Wisconsin as a gay youth, lacking a supportive school community, Wesley experienced firsthand the need for providing safe spaces, adult allies, and targeted training around supporting diverse students with needs other than academics. As a classroom teacher and as a program coordinator and mentor, Wesley helps underserved youth by promoting social emotional learning, building supportive school communities, and by utilizing growth mindset principles while being a role model for students and teachers in the classroom. Welcome, Wesley.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Jerry Sherk. Jerry is the owner and operator of Mentor Management Systems, a California-based consulting firm. Jerry has almost 25 years of experience as a youth mentoring consultant and trainer. He has provided training and technical assistance to hundreds of programs through OJJDP's National Mentoring Resource Center and the California Mentoring Partnership. Jerry has worked directly with young people through his role as a school counselor and has also developed and implemented mentoring programs in San Diego City schools. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you.
So to get us started today, I'm going to first pass it over to Jerry, who's going to review our agenda for today.
Okay, great. Thanks, and we're certainly glad that you've all tuned into this webinar. We're excited to be providing it on ongoing training. It's something that, as you know, it's important, but it's often overlooked in mentoring programs. In fact, if you scan the internet, you'll find very few resources if you Google ongoing training. But we're going to try to change all that today, as we're going to cover a lot of territory, and we've attached quite a few good resources. You can see the topics there, so I'm not going to read all of them, but I want to bring your attention down to the 12 modules of curriculum for ongoing training. So I'm excited that Judy's going to be able to talk about that. It was a document that was created several years ago through the Department of Education grant, and it has 12 complete modules that you can provide on ongoing training. She was one of the co-authors. And then also we're going to touch on a little bit right at the end, ongoing training for group mentoring. And as Jennifer said, I'm a consultant for the National Mentoring Resource Center, and what we're seeing is somewhere around 50% of programs have some form of group mentoring. So it's good that we're going to at least touch on that. And of course, we're going to have resources for developing ongoing training. And I believe if you look at your panel on the right side, you can see them. And as Jennifer said, I believe Melissa and Jennifer are going to send those out in an email later on too. So next slide, please. We're going to start by doing an overview of ongoing training. So you may have seen and heard different terminology for ongoing training. So it could be ongoing. Some people call it advanced, some post-match. I've seen, I think in the effective practices even, maybe it's called in-service. And then I like to think of it sometimes as mentor round tables, and I'll discuss later a model of supervision that's more like a round table. And I like that name because it's a nice, friendly name. It's not as off-putting as training. So anyway, looking at the effective practices on ongoing training, if you look at the effective practices and you go to the enhancements, it'll say, well, I believe for the initial training, it says 2 hours of training for the pre-match or initial training. Then the enhancement, it'll say 4 more hours of ongoing training on such areas such as child development, culture, gender, race, religion, and so forth. It also mentions, and I think it's good that it mentions in the effective practices that during ongoing training, it can be used as a further screening process. So if you see somebody acting inappropriately or not able to manage their emotions or whatever, you can actually use that as screening. The formats for ongoing training, of course, the models are individual and group mentoring. What we've seen as consultants out there to the field is that not all programs provide ongoing training. And it could even be in the minority that actually provide this. One of the problems for this is attendance of the mentors is sporadic, and we're going to address that. And again, there are a few internet resources on ongoing training and a little bit of research. And speaking of research, the next slide. So looked all over the internet. There were a few more studies than these two. Martin and Cyphers in 2012 highlight the importance of quality training in general, and then they talk about ongoing training, and they provide the strategy that perhaps ongoing training could be more frequent in the beginning of relationships. And this makes sense, and I think a lot of us practitioners know this, that if something's going to happen in a mentoring relationship or even in the group setting, that if there's a problem, it's usually going to show right away. So if you can get mentors into ongoing training right after their match or right after they meet their mentee, that's the best thing. On the NMRC website, there's a study about post-match training for mentors, and what it says is that there's insufficient research on post-match training to see if it's really effective. But I think we can all agree it's common sense that ongoing training is helpful. My background is as a counselor, and when I was going through my internships, we always had both individual and group supervision, and it's very helpful. So if you can bring in the mentors, actually get them to attend and provide them with some sound training modules and help them assess their obstacles that they're maybe facing in their matches, it's got to be helpful. That's just common sense. Next slide, please. So the benefits of ongoing training are many. You can educate and remind mentors of the basics, and I can remember sitting in on more than one mentor roundtable where I know that the mentors were trained in the correct way, but they would bring up issues that showed that they'd forgotten what was presented in the initial training. So in one instance, this is years ago, I was sitting in on a round table, and a mentor was talking about her mentee, and she said, "I'm having problems with my mentee." And the other mentor said, "Tell us about it." She said, "Well, I told her that if she didn't bring her homework in, just not to show up." And everybody was just kind of aghast at that. And she had just forgotten that the basic fundamentals of mentoring is to be non-prescriptive and non-directive, and to try to develop the relationship, and not necessarily to try to get her mentee to do something. But she had described later on in that session that she had gone to advice from her husband, and her husband told her that she better maintain the discipline. So it's a good reminder at times for those basic mentor attitudes, because sometimes people forget or they're influenced by others. It's also a time that you can introduce advanced topics. So some programs will only train a couple hours for the initial mentor training. And of course, you want to cover all the basics there, especially all the safety issues and program rules and guidelines, and then the basics of how to develop a relationship. And sometimes you don't get to those advanced topics. And so in ongoing training, it's a good place to do that. You can also provide monitoring and support. How's your match going? And help them to problem solve. Again, I'll talk about a model or an exercise to do that in a couple minutes. And then also be aware of patterns that come up. So it could be that the mentors are relating behaviors of the mentees or interaction with parents. Some problems come up. it could be unrealistic mentor expectations. I sat in on another mentor roundtable, and several of the mentors were more or less angry because the mentees weren't thanking them for the time that they spent with them. And again, that goes back to the basic mentor attitudes, and it could be that that program maybe didn't cover that. It's an unrealistic expectation that the mentees are going to thank them each and every time for showing up. Next slide, please. So there's many more benefits. You can monitor mentors are not upholding their commitments and program rules. I can remember another roundtable where a mentor came in and he was just talking about his relationship with his mentee, and he took his mentee out, and he said, and I dropped him off at 10 p.m. and the other mentors kind of looked at each other, and I heard a couple of them whispering like we're supposed to have them home by 7 o'clock. So that's a good time to catch things like that. And then, of course, you can revise your initial trainings and supervision based on what you see going on. It's really a great time to encourage mentors to recruit friends. I've heard program coordinators say that at times in ongoing trainings, they'll ask their mentors to come up with 2 names for people that could potentially be volunteers, mentors in the program. And of course, acknowledge, reward, and praise, and thank and encourage the mentors. A great time to do this. I always go back to a book I read, and actually I saw the author speak one time, and it was called 1001 Ways to Reward Employees. And it was a study about 1,500 people they surveyed, and they asked what they weren't getting from their boss that they would like to get. And 4 out of the top 5 were some form of thank yous. Now, mentors are not necessarily employees, but it's still kind of in the the human realm that people just like to be thanked. So the various ways of thanking, even in the study, were a face-to-face verbal thank you, a written thank you, a thank you in front of peers, and so forth. And then also you can build a sense of team, especially if you have exercises where mentors are working together and they're interactive and they're actually supporting and giving each other advice and suggestions and praise. So next, please. And I think a lot of us that have held ongoing trainings know that it's just difficult to get people there. The number one drawback for anybody even becoming a mentoring is the lack of time. So to add more trainings just makes it difficult for mentors, and sometimes they just don't want to do it. So getting their buy-in commitment is important, and you need to do that. And then also staff is very busy. I've run mentoring programs myself, and when it comes down to ongoing training and things like evaluation, sometimes you're just scratching your head, just like, how am I going to get this done? And then, of course, the mentor no-shows, and then staff not making them accountable. I'll give some strategies coming up on that. And then staff not sure how to develop and implement ongoing trainings, which we're going to cover today and give you lots of suggestions and materials. So next, please. So one way to increase attendance is to make the training's actually fun and interactive. If you don't have an interaction or interactive exercise during a training, it's probably not going to be a very exciting training if you just have mentors just kind of sitting there on their hands and just receiving information. So you always want to mix it up, a mixture of didactic or lecture and interaction. And to do that, sometimes you can bring in guest speakers to speak on a specific subject. So I've seen roundtables or ongoing trainings where social workers come in and talk about confidentiality and child abuse reporting, and people come in and talk about ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, child development, just different things that will get the interest of the mentors. You can consider meeting over coffee or a meal. I was helping a program up in Oregon, up in Redmond, a youth build mentoring program, and I was able to meet with them during an ongoing training. They actually went to a coffee shop. They sent out the reminders to the training. They called it a coffee clatch, whatever that is, but it sounds kind of warm and fuzzy, but about 6 or 8 mentors showed up, and it was a real good meeting. And of course, when you're munching on a muffin and drinking coffee or tea, those endorphins go off and makes everything feel just a little bit cozier, so forth. And then you can also create a sense of team through the mentor roundtable approach. And I'm going to talk on the later slide about an exercise called Obstacles and Successes, which is a really simple and clear way to provide support and supervision to the mentors. And it's also, it'll be sent out as an attachment. Now, the mandatory part, this is really important because sometimes programs will say, you know, there are 4 ongoing trainings a year, 2 of them are mandatory. Please also attend the first one after your match. And then mentors don't show up, and then the program coordinators don't do anything about it. And I get why people don't do anything about it. Again, I've been a program coordinator, and there's just not time. You can't recreate a whole training. So one of my strategies was, and it worked, is to say, as I'm announcing the training, and if you can't make it, please contact me ahead of time. So that's number 1. And then number 2, I'll help you make up the training in some way. And it's not that you have to recreate the entire training, but if you call them up on the phone or let them know that you're going to give them a call, and you spend, 7 or 10 or 12 or 20 minutes just covering what you covered in the round table, number 1, it's going to give them information that they missed. And number 2, they're going to think twice about it next time, because, the program coordinator needed to call them up and cover that material. So I found that effective. It doesn't work for everybody, but I think your numbers will go up if you put some form of accountability in. Because if you don't, and then people don't show up, the first few mentors, maybe half of them show up the first time, and they're looking at each other going, well, this is mandatory, but so-and-so's not here, or half the people aren't here. And then the next time there's half as many again. So you've got a quarter, and then it goes down to almost none. Next slide, please. So for those that are not confident in their abilities to supervise, and this can cause some programs not to have ongoing trainings because they don't know what's going to come up, or they may not know how to answer questions if there's issues going on within the training. So some things that you can do is if you have other experienced staff, ask them to sit in on the ongoing training. You can also reach out to social workers. Some programs actually go to universities to recruit mentors, both for one-to-one and group mentoring programs. So if you do have somebody that's even in training, sometimes their voice is helpful because they've been through supervision when it has to do with relationship issues, and they can jump in there sometimes if somebody has an issue or a problem with their mentee that they're talking about. And then you can also ask one or more experienced mentors to assist you. And it could be that somebody is a retired school teacher, and you just have confidence in his or her ability to come up with some good solutions. And then we have this actually in the training a couple times because it's important. Sometimes when issues come up, if you don't know how to handle it, you may just kind of gloss over it, or try to distract by moving on or talking about something else. But you really need to address it by saying something like, I know this isn't important. I don't have the answer, but I'm going to reach out and get some resources, and I'll get back to you on whatever that is. Next, please. So the types of training are actually the length of training, and the numbers. So larger programs, and especially programs that have youth that are more underserved or higher risk and have more obstacles, it's better to have more trainings because you're dealing with more issues. So some really big programs might have monthly trainings, but typically they're not going to ask their mentors to attend every month. So, if it's a huge program, they have, 10 or 12 trainings a year, they may say, you need to attend 3 or 4 trainings. So more likely programs will have trainings quarterly. The duration for training sessions differ. I know some group mentoring programs, and Wesley will talk about this a little bit later, just a quick check-in of 10 or 20 minutes. But typically, ongoing trainings will last for 60 to 90 minutes. And then there's some site-based programs that will schedule their trainings right before or after matches. So this is a good way to get people there. So if you have a one-to-one mentoring program at a school, you can check in with the mentors either individually or in small groups right before or right after they meet with their mentees. Next slide, please. So this is an exercise called obstacles and successes that I've used many, many times, and it almost always, if not always, seems to be right on target. And I like it because it's a friendly format. Again, it's the mentor roundtable. How nice is that? Nice and fuzzy. And if you can sit around. It doesn't have to be a round table, but if you sit around a table, that's helpful, where everybody can see everybody else's faces instead of in theater style where you're looking at the back of somebody's head and they're emoting and you don't even pick up their body language. So for this type of training, you wouldn't want to have 20 mentors because everybody wouldn't get a chance to talk. So you might want to have around 6 to 8 mentors. And you can actually bring in some form of, a module to start out with. It could be 20 minutes on communication skills, or you could have a speaker come in and talk about something. But at some point, you would go around and ask each mentor to describe one obstacle and one success they're having with their mentee. And you need to do it, I think, in that order, because you're getting sort of the negative first, and then you deal with that, and then hopefully the mentor will come up with a positive. So it's always kind of an upward wave. You start at the bottom and go to the top. And then the last person that jumps in there isn't going to end with, and my mentor or my mentee doesn't like me, or we're not hitting it off. So it's good to even redirect people if they start out with their success and go to their obstacle to move it in the other direction. And then how you facilitate that would be almost the same way you would facilitate in a group mentoring setting. So you are the program manager. If you were in a group setting, you would be the mentor, and you wouldn't answer everybody's problem. You wouldn't solve their problem. You would ask other people in the group. So it's really good if somebody comes up with an issue to help facilitate that. You as a program coordinator in this obstacles and successes exercise to say, has anybody else had this situation? What did you try? And then if they come up with a good response or a healthy response, you can kind of light up and say, is that something that you think you could try? And then if they come up with a negative or unhealthy possibility, you can try to redirect and say, well, you could do that. We call that the cost-benefit analysis. You could do that, but what might happen? So we've laid that out in a document that is attached to this webinar, and it'll also be sent out, called Obstacles and Successes. And next slide, please. So determining topics for training. Again, you can canvass the mentees, mentors, and parents, and either talk to them, ask them what's going on in their matches, or you'll hear about what's going on with the matches. But I always like to develop topics for ongoing trainings based on what's happening in the program, not some hypothetical topic that I just pulled from the internet. So it could be any from this list: the mentor's inability to connect with the mentees, unrealistic mentor expectations, like the one I mentioned before, the mentors angry because their mentees weren't thanking them, commitment breaches and broken rules, such as the mentor that got his mentee back at 10 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, parent contact issues, maybe parents that are wanting the mentor to be more prescriptive and so forth, and then actually with the mentors themselves being prescriptive or directive. So those would be the refreshers on like the basic mentor attitudes. And then any topic missed during the initial training. So I'm going to turn it over to Judy, and I'm excited about her presentation. I've worked with Judy for years, and we trained a lot together, and she's a terrific trainer, and she's written a lot of documents, and at some point she's going to cover the document with 12 ongoing training sessions. So thanks for being here today, Judy, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks for inviting me, Jerry, and that was a nice job. So what we have here is some additional training topics, and these came from the field. These are issues that the field reported to us were the ones that they were having surfaced most frequently. So the subjects that you want to cover, though, probably won't include everything that Jerry said or everything that's on this list, because the populations that you're serving, it may be more or less important to emphasize one or another category. Some of you may be working with programs that serve special populations, youth that are college-bound or career-focused. You may be looking at academic mentoring, or there may be some kind of problematic issue that the matches are addressing, like drug or alcohol use or abuse. So what you're going to have in your menu of ongoing training will be varied based on what your program is doing. And so if you also pick one of these and it's not exactly right for your program or your population that you're serving, you can always contact the National Mentoring Resource Center, and they will hook you up with a TA provider that can help you tailor your ongoing training approaches and resources for exactly what you're dealing with. And we actually have a handout. Well, I don't think it's a handout yet, is it? Well, we're going to have a handout up there that's got an additional, more complete list of training topics that you might want to consider. And if you don't see training topics that you're dealing with at your programs now, please put it in the chat box and we'll add it to the list and see if we can direct resources to you as well. So we'll get copies of that out to everybody. Okay, so before we go forward, I want to back up a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about mentoring in the early 90s when it was really catching on in this country. And it wasn't long before then that Mentor came up with its first version of the elements of effective practice. And a lot of programs at that time that we were working with did not even bother to train their mentors. They might have had casual conversation or talked to them as part of the interview process, but there was no formal training, so they were not really covering things uniformly, and they were not formulating sort of a community of mentors and mentoring in their programs. So in the early 90s, though, because of the elements of effective practice and because the field was growing, and a lot of individuals, for instance, Patrice Baird in Los Angeles, they were putting together good training sessions for mentors. And it started to become more and more standard practice that mentors would be trained before they would be matched. And I was so happy to see that show up in our communities and in the elements of effective practice. And then we started talking about and thinking about ongoing training, because a lot of the initial training that mentors would get would kind of slip by the wayside, or they would forget about it, as Jerry mentioned. Or things didn't seem real or important to them during their initial training because they hadn't been involved in a match yet. But as they started getting involved in these relationships, the realities of the value of some of this information started to become very apparent. So there was a lot of chatter going on in conversation about ongoing training as a recommended practice. And we would carry that word around and talk about ongoing training and its importance, but there was no material. There was nothing that you could find uniformly available on ongoing training for mentors. So we were at that time involved in the U.S. Department of Education initiative. It was an academic mentoring effort, and it had well over 250 programs that were funded around the country at one time or another. I think they had 2 or 3 cohorts of academic mentoring programs. So if you would turn the page for me, turn the slide for me. So one of the wonderful things about working on that project was we got to have input into the resources that we developed. And one of the resources we thought would be really important would be to fill in that gap and provide some ongoing training materials that the field could use. So we got that approved, and a group of us got together and developed what we called, very cleverly, ongoing training for mentors. And what this document is actually a component, 12 components, and each component with a complete training package that a program coordinator or trainer or other staff person could pick up, review it, make sure they were comfortable with it, make sure that they made any changes that were relevant to their local population that they were serving, and conduct this training. And so there's a first chapter in there that gives some context, but other than that, it's 12 discrete ongoing training modules. Can you turn the slide for me? Thank you. So I asked them to copy for us the table of contents here so you can see the subject areas that we covered, and we drew from the community to find out which ones they thought were most important. You know, time goes on, and I think that there would be some other chapters that people would feel were critical for the way we're approaching mentoring now. For instance, LGBT issues might be a good one to add to your repertoire. But here's ones that were popular at the time, and that's understanding adolescent health issues, helping your mentee with homework, planning activities, which we got so much. We got so many questions about what kind of activities can I do with my mentee under these circumstances, working with mentees' families. The research since this document was created has substantiated how important family involvement is in the success of a mentoring relationship. So this becomes even more critical. Money matters, teaching young people how to manage money, preparing for closure, dealing with boundaries and confidentiality, how to deal with, how to support your mentee when they're facing a bully or dealing with a bully. Effective communications is always an important one. What do I do now when my mentee experiences a crisis? The identity issues one is really about diversity and cultural issues and goal setting with your mentee. And you will find at the bottom of the page here the link to this document, which you can access completely online, either through that link, or if you just Google ongoing training for mentors, this is going to turn up on the first page. Another slide, please. Okay, so I want you to know how this is laid out because it's uniformly laid out the same way for each of the 12 modules. One, the author's identified and the duration is specified. So the duration for these are all between 1 and 2 hours. Most of them are 1 hour, a few of them are an hour and a half, and then I think there's one of them that's 2 hours. They specify for you what kind of materials you're going to need to conduct this training or any AV requirements. They make suggestions on how the room should be set up, and they give a brief description of the training. And once again, even though we lay it out like this, you can obviously tweak it to make sense for the population that you're serving and the people who are going to be attending your training. Something else I wanted, and then following that, don't change the slide yet, but following that, each session, each of the 12 sessions gives a detailed step-by-step tutorial on how to deliver this training, and it tells you how long each component of the training is going to be. It also provides for you handouts and tools that mentors can use with mentees, and it gives additional resources if you want to dig deeper into the particular subject that's being covered in the training session. Okay, thank you. So next slide, please. I want to emphasize that no matter what the training is, there are some issues that you want to make sure that you address and think about as you design how you're going to implement these trainings. One is that the training participants need to be clear. However you do that, it may be in conversations one-on-one with mentors prior to designing your training or tweaking your training, or you may have a document that you put together that assesses the needs of the mentors. And obviously your observations as staff at a mentoring program give you information as well about what are the training needs of the mentors in your program. So you want to make sure that when you're providing the training that you give people an opportunity not just to hear, but to actually practice the skills you're talking about. You always want to make sure that they come up with their answers and you're not just lecturing them. So self-reflection should be built into your training. Give them an opportunity to not just work in the large session, but to work in pairs, to work in threes, to work in small groups. And emphasize your interactive approaches. As much of that as you can implant in your training, the better. Use quizzes. I use little handouts for correct. I give out handouts even for incorrect answers because they were brave enough to participate. But including interactive quizzes, using scenarios and role plays, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. And ask your mentors to come up with the answer. Share something is something Jerry just gave you an example of. And making something is always great if you can have them actually create something in the training session or solve an issue so that the learning comes from the inside out. When you do it that way, they keep what they've learned and they incorporate it into their nomenclature. They incorporate it into their relationships with their mentees. Okay, I'd like to show you an example of making something and solving something. So if you look at the next slide, this is Jerry Sherk's favorite activity. I always have to pull him away from the magic markers so that the mentors we're training get to do this and not Jerry. And what we've done here is, this is a great example of making something exercise. So over the years, I guess we've done this probably over 200 times. So after you talk about mentoring concepts, you break people up into groups of 4 or 5 or 6, and then you ask each one to draw an outline of an individual without any details on it. So this is kind of like you would find it at a crime scene where there was a body, and they just outline the body. That's what you want to start with. Then you let each mentor draw symbols or traits that represent their ideal mentor as part of the body where the trait might occur. So an example of that might be they might draw a watch on the wrist of the mentor to demonstrate that mentors make time for their mentees. So you go on with that for about 10 minutes, and after everyone is finished, you have grand unveilings, and that's part of the debrief process. So each group comes up and present their picture, and mentors love this. They seem to have a good time, they have a good laugh, and as they try to draw these traits, they reinforce the concepts that you've been talking to them about. So we've included instructions for this exercise in the handouts that will come with this presentation. And it's just one of the exercises that you can do that are interactive with your mentors about making something. So I would suggest, if you haven't done that exercise before with your mentors, try it. It's easy, it's fun, people love it, and it's one of a million exercises that Jerry and I have. And if you need more ideas, feel free to contact us. So an example of a solve something exercise is a scenario that we present here. And it's a great idea to create scenarios based on things that are actually going on in your program. It's a nice way of dealing with them. And on this slide, there's an example of a mother who wants her boy mentor to be a taskmaster, which obviously is not what we're looking for in mentors. So scenarios are great because you can use them to address adult learning theory as well as, what's going on in your program. So you want the participants in your program to be able to come up with answers based on their life experiences. So when you think about it, having workshop participants solve something also aligns with mentoring concepts, because just like youth in the mentoring program, we don't want to be telling them what to do. Instead, we're asking them what they might do. And that's a good way of role modeling for mentors. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the facilitation of these exercises, because there's some things I think it's important to remember. And one is never embarrass anybody. When you're the trainer in a room, you are responsible for the welfare of all your participants. So if they tend to go off track, and I think, Jerry, you gave an example of this earlier. Oh, you did the cost-benefit analysis, but this is an example of something you might say. You can say, I think I can see where you're getting to at this, or what you're getting at this, and then go on and give some additional clarifying information. You can also use the cost-benefit analysis approach, and Jerry, that is the one that you used as an example. You could say, you could try that, but what might happen? Or ask other mentors in the room for their suggestions before you give your advice. And if you don't have the answers, Jerry, you said this, and I'm emphasizing it. Let them know that you will get back to them on it. Okay, next slide, please. My favorite activity in a training is to role play, but to role play what I call the safe way. And that's after providing the topic that you're going to talk about, maybe first mentoring, you invite 2 volunteers to do a role play, but you tell them that you're going to ensure that they will be safe and not embarrassed. Then you give them the scenario and you ask them to role play it for a couple of minutes, but to do it all wrong. So they can't get embarrassed because you've asked them to mess it up. And then during the debrief, you ask the group, so what did you see that was wrong? And give them these 2 role players a big hand for doing wrong so well. And then ask them to repeat it, but don't ask them to be perfect. Ask them to do it just a little bit better. And then you can debrief what improvements that you saw. And I'm going to throw this in here right before we go to the final slide for my section. And that's that you might want to be thinking about ongoing training, not just for your mentors, but for your mentees as well, because their ongoing learning is as important as the mentors is to help make these relationships successful. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things I want to do is I want to emphasize that you should evaluate all your training activities so you can improve it, so we can get our messages across more effectively. So here's some things that you might want to ask in a mentor survey and follow up to ongoing training. And this was pulled from the NMRC practice review. Okay, thank you. So I think as Jerry pointed out, training for group mentoring is as important as the one-to-one mentoring. And Wesley, I think you're going to take it over here. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Judy. So I'm the current coordinator of Project-Derived Group Mentoring, which started in SFUSD 5 years ago as a research project funded through OJJDP in collaboration with Georgia State University. The website that's being developed as an online operations manual has a wealth of resources, trainings, and curriculum. Dr. Gabe Coopermink of the Research Board has been conducting a study on our effort, and the students are showing positive outcomes. Please feel free to go to our website as we have lots of good information there. Ninth graders are identified early in the school year based on previous attendance and grades from middle school to voluntarily participate in group mentoring. Students meet weekly in groups with their mentors for at least 6 months. Mentors are recruited and trained in the beginning of the year by myself, the district trainer, and site coordinators at each school begin to look at student schedules and identify students that would most benefit. Initial interviews are conducted with interested students, and parent consent to participate is also gathered. Mentors spend the forming stage of group development guiding students through group agreements, group routines and structures, getting to know each other, and building a community of students who feel listened to by their mentors and peers. Next slide. Mentors are meeting weekly with groups during the school day. Most mentors are staff in the schools with regular schedules, so they're able to plan consistent times to debrief group and plan for the week ahead. Oftentimes, students bring up things in groups that have to do with school climate, teachers, friends, and family. During mentor debriefs, mentors can discuss any steps to support this. This will likely generate the topic for next week's group in a direct response to what students shared in the current group. Co-mentors are reflecting on the group stage and any steps forward or backward with how the group dynamic is shaping up. If new students join the group or certain students are absent, the group stage fluctuates and different activities are going to become more or less engaging. Co-mentor, sometimes there is also conflict Actually, can you go back? I'm still on the slide before. Sometimes there's also conflict and disagreements between students in the group, and follow-up is necessary. So during debrief, mentors can discuss and can follow up individually with students before the next group. Ninth grade students are often overwhelmed with the transition to high school, and so and have many competing commitments: class, extracurricular activities, and balancing their responsibility to their families. Sometimes students miss group due to obligations in class, and so having a sense of what's going on for students at school, it's important, and it's a great discussion topic during the debrief. The mentoring group is an extra commitment for students, and during the forming and storming group development phases can feel like it's too much, and sometimes student attendance wanes. Students need to feel tangible value from each group. During mentor debriefs, determining where students are at with feeling valued should be discussed, as well as what changes mentors can make to keep students engaged during the more difficult group phases. Mentors that take time to reflect and plan the group in such a way where there is a check-in, an icebreaker, a main activity and a discussion, and a closing will find that students come to appreciate and look forward to a group routine. The closing is also important because it leads to students' final thoughts and takeaways from the day, which can be useful in the mentor debrief to determine the next steps in the group. Next slide. Each school is unique in how they deliver their group mentoring program. Some schools have been participating for the past 5 years, and some are new to group mentoring this year. Many brand new mentors come aboard each year in schools, and staff have to wear many hats and transition yearly. In addition to school staff, we have volunteer group mentors from the community who are not on site full-time. Providing ongoing site-specific training, addressing some of the topics on this slide, and asking mentors what training they need and when has been important to valuing mentors' time. Our group mentoring program intentionally selects 8 to 10 struggling students, and this means that 8 to 10 students will be in a group setting presenting challenges. This is usually a foreign experience to mentors, especially new mentors. Many things are coming up for mentors, and through weekly check-ins or surveys, we begin to provide additional training and support. Probably one of the most valuable discussions is around the role of a mentor and wearing only the mentor hat. While this is focused on during the initial training, it needs reinforcement throughout the mentoring group relationship. Getting to know students and specifically knowing who are their go-to persons can alleviate a lot of stress on mentors. Mentors do not have to solve everything for students. Students in our mentoring groups have unique support systems. They work with a lot of different support persons, case managers, teachers, after-school programs, counselors, and working with those, if mentors are working with those, that can really increase student success. Since mentoring groups are not individual one-to-one relationships, it takes more time for mentors to get to know students in a group setting, and especially being able to connect individually with the adult supporters of these students. The benefit of group mentoring is that once the later group stages are entered, mentors can become more a facilitator, and students can turn to other students for support to help solve other challenges in and out of school. Being a group mentor has allowed me to be able to better support and understand the challenges of being a mentor in high schools. A coordinator who can develop relationships with mentors so that mentors feel like they can ask for support and receive it in a positive way is really essential to student success in group mentoring programs. Volunteering to group mentor a group of struggling students is challenging, and acknowledging and making it a valuable experience for the mentee and mentor is always my ultimate goal. Next slide. The initial mentoring training focuses on getting the group up and running. A few months into the mentoring relationship, mentors have more interest and need for curriculum and group ideas. We look at curriculum in terms of Tuckman's group stages and ask mentors to monitor the group stage and choose activities according to where they feel students are at in the group. The group's long-term success is dependent upon the relationships built in the forming stage. After this initial stage, 8 to 10 sessions, mentors begin to develop a routine. After the forming stage is a great opportunity to offer mentors ongoing training and curriculum in digestible amounts by topic. I've been sending weekly emails for about 15 to 20 weeks with topics and ready-to-go activities laid out in a group structure talked about earlier. Oftentimes, mentors are extremely busy and can't often attend regular off-site trainings. Consistent weekly emails have been the right dosage to provide mentors diverse activities and topics for their groups. Additionally, following up with on-site trainings where mentors participate in the activities that can be done in the groups helps ensure that curriculum is being used. Utilizing online surveys to ascertain how often groups use curriculum and what topics they would like additional resources on has also been useful. Oftentimes, co-mentors get into a routine of who gathers materials for the group and who facilitates certain group components. Weekly emails and occasional online polls are great opportunities to assess how the co-mentor relationship is working too. In order to support programs at multiple schools, I facilitated all the group mentee trainings, allowing mentors and mentees an opportunity to understand and clarify their roles together at the first group. Since this occurred at the first meeting of the group, it also allows me, the coordinator, to continue to come into the group for any needed support throughout the year. Most school sites have more than one group running, and so organizing school-specific trainings gives mentors from different groups within a school a chance to learn from each other within the context of their school site, as opposed to larger trainings that may not be as school-focused. If you get a chance, please check out the website link on the slide for activities and more info on the group stages. Now I'd like to hand it back over to Jerry.
Thank you, Wesley. Good job. And I just want to reiterate what Wesley said about their website. I've been to it and searched around, and they're trying to make it actually a model website for group mentoring, but there's also resources there for curriculum that, say, mentors and mentees can use together, like goal setting documents and things like that. So they're doing a great job, and they're going to leave it up and open it up to the field. And they've got, it's kind of like everything but the kitchen sink there. So good job with that. Just want to mention the resources that are attached to this training, and then the team from Mentor is going to send out an email also, and we'll probably add a couple additional resources. But the ongoing training book with the full 12 sessions is there that Judy spoke of. And starting from the top, the exercise for obstacles and successes. And then I think in the mentoring field, Judy is actually the first person that came up with the right way, wrong way role plays, or actually wrong way, right way role plays. So that's written up. And then we have 8 sample scenarios for ongoing training. And just be sure when you create your scenarios to change them a little bit and make them specific to what's been happening in the program. Of course, you never want to embarrass anybody by making it exactly their situation, especially if they didn't handle it well. So change the names and the scenario a little bit. And then Judy has added 60 training tips. So thank you to Judy and Wesley for your presentations, and I'm going to hand it over to the team, and I think they may have a couple questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, and thanks to Judy and Wesley for sharing your experiences and your guidance with this audience. It was a lot of concrete advice, which is much appreciated, I know. And I know we've seen a lot of great questions come in, so we're going to use the remaining 10 or 15 minutes to respond to as many as possible. So I'm going to pass things over to my colleague Melissa, who will be queuing up some questions for our panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Jen, and thank you to all of our panelists. This first question, actually, I'm going to stick with you, Jerry,
Okay.
I probably will turn it over to Judy right after, but we'll go with this first one with you. So, yeah, what are the pros and cons of doing online training for mentors? You know, like through webinars such as this or online modules.
Well, we actually talked about trying to present that aspect for this training. We had difficulty actually locating the resources. I think in today's world, everything is going sort of to online and to, texting and social media and things like that. So I think we all need to continue to think about it. I know my preference is to actually get the mentors in front of me so that I develop a relationship with them, that they develop a relationship with each other. But again, that time factor is really crucial. And I would say if somebody figures out a way to, develop something online, or to do a training online, or even to create a webinar and make sure all the mentors dial in and then boot it up on their computer, that would be a good thing. If nothing else, I would want to mix. I would want to see them every once in a while. We all know, many of us have been involved with communication skills trainings, and we know that it could be, depending on the study, 70, 80, 90, 95% of communication is done through picking up body language. So you obviously don't get that on the phone. But sure, if you can find resources, or if you can create something, I think in addition to face-to-face, that would be good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Judy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I agree with everything that Jerry said. I do know that there's some packages that exist that are mentor trainings, but they aren't going to be 100% specific to other programs. They're written to be more generic for mentoring in general. If there's an interest in that, I can dig them up and see if we can get them shown through Mentor, if Mentor wants to take a shot at that. And Melissa, does Mentor have some online trainings, courses for mentors?
Not currently online trainings. We do have them for starting a mentoring program. We will have some trainings specific to special populations of youth coming out at the end of this year, but currently not as an online module online.
Okay, well, maybe if you guys are interested, we can take a look at some of those that we did under the Department of Ed and see if it would make sense to put them up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judy. Okay, so I'm going to, because there have been a couple of questions on how do you get mentors to come to these trainings? How do you incentivize it? And actually, Wesley, you work with schools. How do you get the mentors to actually come and participate and really, keep them active in the program?
Yeah, so being part of a big school district, really being able to offer trainings at times that are convenient and locations that are convenient. So we've been moving around to trainings at different sites. We've been meeting some mentors before school, some mentors after school, just being really cognizant of the school staff schedule, and really, getting them to kind of commit to a convenient time for them, and being available to make that training, and really kind of holding our mentors to doing the training and being like, we'll find the time that works for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Jerry, actually, do you mind chiming in on that? What would you do to get mentors that are not really actively participating or who consistently say they can't attend ongoing trainings? How would you get them to come to the trainings?
I think, first of all, you have to put it out there from the very start to let them know that this is part of the process, and that, the trainings are important. And if the trainings are mandatory, that, just like I said earlier in the webinar, if they miss a training, then the program coordinator is going to call them and review the training with them. But just, one is to say this is part of the program. You have an initial mentor training, then you have ongoing trainings. It's important that you attend, because we're going to be answering questions, giving you more information. We're going to be supporting each other. And then also, make them fun and interactive. And I mentioned earlier, if you can meet at a restaurant, the ongoing trainings that I've seen that have met in restaurants and coffee shops have a totally different feel. It doesn't seem like a burden for people to go to them. It seems like they really like being there and sitting in the chat and having coffee or tea and a muffin and things like that. And then the other strategy is to, don't have it be you all the time. If you're the only face that the mentors see, is to bring other people in. to sort of get that cross-pollination and the excitement of somebody that knows something else and has a different perspective on things as a guest speaker. So those are a few strategies.
You can also have panels of mentors and mentees to be highlighted or speak at the training. And you don't have to call it training. You can call it a mentor reception, and always have a component where you're recognizing the contributions that the mentors are making as part of the activity that you cover while you're together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. And I know we covered a few of training topics that we could address during these trainings, but what have you all seen? And I'll start with you, Jerry. What have you seen to be the most successful, delivery to mentors? What trainings do you think have been most successful, most receptive to the mentors themselves?
I think anything to do with communication skills is so very important. And usually in those initial trainings, if they're 2 to 3, even 4 hours, sometimes even when I do a training, I'll only have 10 minutes or 15 minutes to touch on communication skills. So I think just any way that you can cover communication skills is really important. It is about, we all know it's about relationship, and it's developing the relationship. So there are many ways to address those, communication skills that help you bond with the mentee, and things like just going over problem solving, which gets back into the basic mentor attitude that you're not telling the mentee what to do, but you're asking questions, just giving them tips and tools. I did a training recently, and I kind of leaned back on my own counseling background, and I said, the word ideas is a really good word to use when you're helping people to solve problems. Instead of asking them, how do you solve this, or what do you need to do you have any ideas about what you might do? So just little things like that, just giving the mentors tips and tools. Other areas I think mentors really appreciate, child development, just kind of understanding child development and what mentoring is trying to help do, putting that trusting person in their life so that they'll trust the mentor more. And if they can trust that one person or develop a relationship with one person, they'll have confidence in developing relationships with others, and especially other adults. And if they trust the mentor, then they will have a much better chance of risking and trusting the world. But, to come back and wrap it up into 2 words, communication skills, I think, is really important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry. And Wesley, do you have any training topics that you've seen with your mentors that have really kind of hit the home run there, per se?
Sure. So with group mentoring, we're using a co-facilitation model. And so, making sure to pay extra attention to that when we're training, and to continue with ongoing training about how to work with somebody. Oftentimes people have lots of different experiences working on a team or working with another person to kind of facilitate a group. And we really just want to, in training, give co-facilitators an opportunity to kind of talk about themselves and be able to kind of see how different people respond to different situations, and to really, that's a great way to model working together for the mentees. So we really focus on that. Really, you're demonstrating how we want to see students working together in the group as co-mentors. And then the other piece to that too is just reminding mentors and talking with mentors about when they're part of a group, kind of how they experience those group stages, and that not to be too hard on themselves, because there is an ebb and a flow with groups. And so that's okay.
think it's all set.
Yeah. Sorry, Wesley, do you want to finish your thought?
I think that's, I think it's just really important that when we're working in groups that, the co-mentors, when they're working together, do kind of remember how the group stages work and to make sure that, they understand there's a forming and a storming and a norming and a performing. And so to kind of how to tailor their group to whatever stage they might be in.
Oh, goodness, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're kind of actually right at the at time, so hopefully we got all the questions answered, but thank you so much all.
Yeah, thank you again. So I'm going to just close us out today by talking through some additional resources and some next steps that you can expect. So as some of you know, Mentor scales impact by developing and supporting a national network of affiliates. These affiliates provide the leadership and infrastructure necessary to support the expansion of quality mentoring relationships in local communities or statewide. Mentor affiliates also serve a really unique role as a clearinghouse for training, resources, public awareness, and advocacy. So we encourage you to find out whether you have an affiliate in your region and connect with them to learn more about what they offer. Additionally, we encourage you to register your program with the Mentoring Connector, which is our national database of mentoring programs. And finally, check out the OJJDP National Mentoring Resource Center website for no-cost mentoring resources to help you apply evidence-based mentoring practices to your program. The NMRC provides evidence reviews on mentoring models and mentoring for special populations. There are implementation resources, a research board, a blog, so there's just a great hub of information there. And as a reminder, 1 week after the webinar, all attendees will receive an email with a link to the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series webpage, where we'll post the recording of this webinar, the slides, and all of the additional resources that we talked about today. So I know some of our panelists referenced the ongoing training packet and the Build an Ideal Mentor activity. All of those will be uploaded to our website within the next week, and you'll receive an email when that has been done. And also, don't forget, we want your feedback. At the end of today's webinar, please answer the short survey and help us make this series even better. Be sure to visit the CMWS page on the Mentor website for an archive of all past webinars and information about upcoming webinars. We've really done a variety of different topics over the past 5 years, so hopefully you find some that are of interest to you. And I just wanted to thank everyone again for joining today, and thank you to our panelists for really sharing your experiences and your expertise and your guidance. I think this was a great webinar. And we encourage everyone to join us next month on June 21st for a discussion on youth-initiated mentoring. All right, everyone. I hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week, and we hopefully will see you next month. All right, bye, everyone.